Boa tarde a todos vocês aí no Brasil. Hoje, 2h04, horário do Brasil, 18h04 aqui na Europa. Estamos entrando diretamente do Senado, do Parlamento Europeu, que vamos transmitir ao vivo para vocês essa reunião importantíssima que está acontecendo na União Europeia. E são médicos que vão, a convite aí da deputada do Parlamento Europeu, Francesca Donato, e do outro parlamentar europeu, Ivan Viliborchin, vão estar fazendo esse encontro importante, né, para compartilhar as experiências em relação à clínica no tratamento médico aí para essa doença, que é o Covid-19. Então, fique com a gente, que essa transmissão é muito importante para que vocês compreendam o que realmente está acontecendo e escutem vozes, né, da ciência, como a palavra mais usada aí nos últimos 2 anos, e que essas pessoas, esses médicos, pesquisadores renomados em todo o mundo, sejam ouvidos hoje, nesse dia histórico no Parlamento Europeu. Então, fique com a gente aqui no COVIDflix e acompanhe, e a gente vai entrando, eu vou comentando, e a gente vai falando sobre os médicos que estão hoje ali no Parlamento Europeu. Fica com a gente.
Has been really no treatment. We call this therapeutic nihilism. Why is that? Is there any other disease in medicine where doctors are told not to treat early? And by the time the patient is hospitalized, it's often too late. We've lost an important window of opportunity to treat patients, and the goal is to treat early. I took the Hippocratic Oath. The concept of doing no harm. If knowledge that there are therapies that have potential benefits to help my patients, why would I withhold those treatments? To me, that was just not acceptable. To understand treatment, you have to understand a little bit about the phases of the COVID-19 disease. There are different phases: pre-symptomatic, symptomatic, viral replication phase, and then the more dangerous inflammatory phase. There are multiple different therapeutics that target the different phases of this disease. But waiting for that dangerous inflammatory phase is often too late, and it's harder to treat. To understand treatment, you have to understand a little bit about immunity and nutrients.
Ele fala que, primeiramente, antes de discutir ou entender o tratamento, você tem que entender a doença que você está tratando.
Keep in mind, it's not the virus that kills patients. It's a dysfunction of the immune system caused by massive inflammation. Vitamin D. Vitamin D has been known to affect the immune system for many years. Vitamin D is not just a vitamin, it has hormonal properties. It functions
Para entender o tratamento, você precisa entender também pouco de nutrientes.
Since COVID, there's been extensive data indicating that vitamin D deficiency is associated with an increased risk of hospitalization, including ICU. Vitamin D is inexpensive, readily available, and is the single most important thing that a population can do as a whole to optimize their immune system and reduce risk of severe disease. In September, I attended the International COVID Summit in Rome. I gave a presentation in the Senate, and I talked about how different nutrients support the immune system. And that included vitamin D, vitamin C, zinc, quercetin, selenium, magnesium, melatonin. I've been teaching my patients how to do this and optimize their immune systems prior to getting sick. You want to target this before they get sick, because once they're sick, it's often too late, but we still encourage support. So talking a little bit about therapeutics. There are multiple existing therapeutics, repurposed medications, as we say, medications that have been on the market for many years, generic, inexpensive. They have known side effect profiles. physicians can use them. We now have protocols from experts that you will hear about today. The FLCCC, Frontline COVID-19 Critical Care Alliance, with their iMask Plus protocol. The Association of American Physicians and Surgeons, Dr. Zelenko, Dr. Farid, who is here today, Dr. Tyson, Dr. Chetty, who is here, many experts around the world who have provided their research, their knowledge, sharing the knowledge to help our patients. And the goal is targeting this viral illness based on the stage of the disease.
Estou com um probleminha no áudio que eu não
As I
estou
think it
ouvindo
was
o que o médico
Dr.
está
Marik who
dizendo.
said,
Então eu não estou
let
conseguindo traduzir para
doctors
vocês.
be
Por isso,
doctors.
estou aqui tentando resolver esse problema.
To not allow doctors to be doctors can result in patient harm. I use my skills as a clinician to use combinations of medications to target the virus at the different phases of disease. And it's important to keep in mind that COVID-19 is not that difficult to treat if you treat it early, especially in patients who need to be treated, those with increased risk factors such as advanced age, obesity, diabetes, hypertension, poor baseline nutrition. And what I can tell you is that patients who are successfully treated, where you've been able to avoid hospitalization and promote early recovery, they are grateful patients. So what are my results since treating? I can say that none of my patients who I've treated early has been hospitalized. I have not lost a single patient in 2 years due to COVID-19. Why is it when I talk to colleagues of mine who tell me they've lost another patient to COVID, that seems to be so normalized? That is not normal to me. My goal is to do everything within my abilities to restore health, which means not to sit idly by. So what have I done as an advocate for early treatment? As has been mentioned, I am a co-founder of the Canadian COVID Care Alliance. This is an organization with over 500 physicians, scientists, and other professionals to promote balanced, credible scientific information, and whose mission statement includes the promotion of early outpatient COVID care. An individual doing advocacy is lonely and challenging. To have the support of a growing, credible organization allows change to occur and to be taken seriously. Because of the need for COVID care, which has been lacking outside of the hospital system, a telemedicine service was recently launched to provide access to Canadians the opportunity to receive compassionate, non-emergency COVID care and prevention with a team of physicians and nurse practitioners. Treating COVID-19 should be a primary care illness, meaning all family doctors should have the tools and support to prescribe. COVID-19 should not be hospital-based managed disease. That is the wrong agenda, which can lead to detrimental results. If the goal is to save lives and end this pandemic, then early treatment must be part of that discussion. It doesn't matter vaccination status. Treatment is treatment for both the vaccinated and unvaccinated, both who can get sick and require the same treatments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Bernstein. Indeed, losing no patients is an incredible thing, and we can do nothing but to congratulate you. Thank you for your presentation. Let's continue forward. Our next doctor is Dr. Shankara Chetty from South Africa. He's a highly revered medical doctor and biological scientist of over 30 years experience from South Africa. He alone has treated over 7,000 COVID patients without a single hospitalization or death. Mr. Chetty, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ivan. It's an honor to present on a platform like this, and I greatly appreciate the opportunity. I am a frontline doctor who endeavored to treat COVID patients from the start of this pandemic. I have worked through the 4 different variant waves in South Africa and have treated patients using my understanding of the progression and pathogenesis of COVID illness. Early on in the pandemic, I made it my duty to examine every single patient personally to understand the progression of the illness and what was getting people into hospital in the first place. In the first wave, the biggest problem that we experienced was the onset of dyspnea, which put patients in hospital and eventually led to ventilations. And I wanted to understand what this dyspnea was all about. So I educated every patient that came in with COVID illness about the onset of dyspnea and to report back to me as soon as it started so that I could examine the symptom clinically and understand what the cause was. In doing so, I found that the initial illness was a typical self-limiting viral illness. And the majority of patients found that by the 5th or 6th day of illness, they experienced signs of recovery. They got their appetite back and had no further sequelae. However, there was a subset of patients who presented back with breathlessness. On interrogating this breathlessness, I found a few unusual things which drew my attention to the pathogenesis of this illness. These patients that came back always came back on the 8th day, presenting with breathlessness. So exactly a week after the onset of illness, in a subset of patients, breathlessness started. I found this very strange that it could be plotted to exactly the day, exactly the 8th day. Then what I discovered was that, well, this showed me that we're dealing with a biphasic illness, 2 different phases. Everyone experiences the first viral phase, but there is a subset of patients who experience the second phase of illness that leads to hospitalization. And it seemed to start exactly on the 8th day. With further interrogation of the symptoms on this day, patients were not presenting with the typical signs of pneumonia. Patients were tired, fatigued, patients were breathless, but they didn't have the severe illness that is associated with a pneumonia. As well, there was no progression in the symptoms. A majority of patients that presented back to me on the 8th day with breathlessness were perfectly fine the day before and had thought that they had recovered from the illness completely, only to wake up on the 8th day and find that they had developed a measure of breathlessness. This breathlessness was progressive and progressive to varying degrees in patients. Some patients presented on the 8th day with very mild breathlessness, and with treatment with a steroid, it resolved relatively quickly in a day or 2. There were others that presented with a moderate onset, more severe breathlessness and took a little longer to resolve. And of course, there were those that became breathless very suddenly and deteriorated very quickly. So looking at this, I was of the understanding very early on that I'm dealing with a biphasic illness where the 2 phases of the illness have no correlation between each other. And it is the second phase of the illness where all the mortality and morbidity of COVID illness actually lie. So this pathology of the second phase is what enticed me into understanding further what actually was happening on this day. It was not a typical pneumonia presentation. There wasn't the progression we see with typical pneumonias. So understanding the type of presentation, I was seeing people present on the 8th day, not everyone, just a subset, some mild, some moderate, and some severe. And this progression, as we knew from hospital examinations at that point, progressed to hyperinflammation and the cytokine storm, and if left untreated, progressed to hypocoagulability and the coagulation problems and clotting that we saw later on in the illness itself. So looking back at the pathology, at the diversity of pathology we as doctors actually treat, I was of the impression that we are dealing with some sort of allergic hypersensitivity reaction triggered by some sort of viral debris on the 8th day. And it is only those patients who are allergic to this debris that actually react. And those are the patients that are at highest risk of mortality and morbidity. And so my treatment interventions followed this understanding. I published an article subsequently explaining that this is a hypersensitivity trigger on the 8th day, and if left untreated, spirals out of control and results in the sequelae we see. Now, treating a hypersensitivity reaction, it requires a high dose of steroid to turn off that tap that has been turned on. It also requires to mop up the mediators that are released that cause all the consequences we see. And so very early on in my protocol, I added antihistamines to mop up the histamines that are released, montelukast to deal with the leukotrienes, and of course an anticoagulant or aspirin to deal with the platelet activating factor. What I found with this addition was a drastic increase in speed to recovery with my patients. Every patient that I treated showed improvement in symptoms the very next day and an improvement in their hypoxia by the very next day. And so in my practice over the last 4 waves, I've now treated over 8,000 patients, some critically ill, who came in to see me with saturations in the 50 and 60%. In all the patients that I've seen thus far, I have not had a hospitalization, I have not had a death, and I have largely negated the need for oxygen in my practice. I do not keep oxygen in my practice simply because the reversal of the hypoxia is timeless. This information has subsequently been verified by an article published by Marcus Sanchez and Kenneth Day, who postulated that the lethality of COVID illness lies in a hypersensitivity kind of pneumonitis rather than a pneumonia that is triggered on the 8th day by some sort of allergen. It has further been verified by a study recently in China that was done through multiple university collaborations that looked at the specific immunoglobulin E subtypes for spike protein and found a direct correlation between those subtypes and severe illness. So it has become clear that some patients on the 8th day, those that are allergic to spike protein, being the allergenic culprit in this illness, have a reaction to spike protein. And that reaction, a hypersensitivity reaction, if left unchecked, spirals out of control into inflammation and hyperinflammation, and then further on into hypercoagulation. The understanding of this pathogenesis of COVID has helped me formulate a treatment protocol that has helped patients around the world. I have subsequently educated doctors in many different countries about this modality of treatment, and they have found exactly the same results, being able to prevent hospitalizations, deaths, and negate the need for oxygen in their practices. The most important thing was the education of patients. So every patient that comes to me with COVID illness, I interrogate them as to the day the symptoms started and use that to plot the 8th day of illness. And then I educate every patient about the possibility of new symptoms arising on that 8th day and the gravity of those symptoms and the need for them to report those symptoms timeously so that I can be quick and aggressive in curtailing this hypersensitivity trigger that can spiral out of control very quickly. And in all the patients that I've seen, I would say 99% of patients who presented with the second phase of the illness did so on the 8th day. And all those patients that presented to me that got treatment timeously resolved relatively quickly. By the following day, there was good clinical improvement. And in those patients where blood testing was not possible due to financial constraints, the clinical improvement of patients was used to gauge clinical recovery. So I think early treatment is safe, effective, and can negate all the mortality and morbidity we have seen with COVID illness. I thank you for the time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chetty. Congratulations for your results. Let's go forward. Our next doctor is Dr. Marta Zoratti from Italy. She is a highly regarded medical doctor who specializes in physical medicine and rehabilitation. She is part of Hippocrates group very famous group, which has successfully treated over 70,000 COVID patients in Italy. Dr. Zoratti, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I can't activate my camera, my video.
Just a moment, we'll try to fix that.
Yes, I think it depends.
For some reason, the situation has not improved.
Okay, well, I can speak also
Audio,
without the
of
video.
course.
No
of course,
problem.
Until we fix that. Please continue.
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very honored to be here and to speak with you. My personal experience is very tied up with Hippocrates.org. Since 1 year, I've been working as a volunteer for Hippocrates.org, and all I know of COVID is thanks to the doctors in Hippocrates.org who formed me and helped me to learn how to treat patients at home with early treatments. It's been a very important year for me. I treat. My job is especially for natural medicine, so it was something really important. And yes, I managed, and so it was really a fantastic year where I learned something really very important for also for me and my family when we had COVID. And the first thing to do is really to do something and to start taking especially anti-inflammatories. There are a lot of publications in PubMed on aspirin. 251 papers have been published on the utility of aspirin in treating COVID-19, especially in the in the early treatment. And there are 183 papers on cortisone, on the efficacy of cortisone in the treatment of COVID-19. Aspirin and anti-inflammatories can be used especially in the first days, and cortisone is best to be used from the 4th, 5th, 6th day of illness. If you start having symptoms with like the fever or high temperature or coughing, it's really very, very important not to wait. My image of COVID in this year is like that of a fire. It's a small fire at the beginning, and you can put it off with using anti-inflammatories and eventually also antibiotics. But if you leave and you wait, it will get bigger and bigger and bigger if you are weak in that moment, or if you are meant to develop in a very hard way COVID-19. So as the days go by and you have to do something, it's really, really very important to treat people. We call them. We are 250 volunteer doctors working as volunteers for Hippocrates.org in Italy. There are 21 coordinators around the world. And yes, we treated at least 70,000 patients in this 1.5 years of treating them. And this is really something really very big and very important. In my experience, it's people need to do something, because it's really, one feels really helpless at home, not doing anything and waiting that something will happen. And the inflammation, people feel that inflammation goes on and develops. So having the possibility to take aspirin or ibuprofen in the first days, or an antibiotic, is really very important, because it calms down this fire. What I really would like you to think about is what happens if tomorrow one of you should be positive to the test. Are you going to wait and see what happens, or are you going to take something? This is really something I would like you to think about, because it's when you see that sign that you're positive, something in your mind triggers. And it's really important to know that people have studied that anti-inflammatories are important and fundamental to treat COVID-19. So that is the first thing to do. Try and find the right anti-inflammatory for you. Some people are allergic to aspirin. Try and find the right anti-inflammatory for the person who is allergic. And from the 4th, 5th day, if the fever is high, if the symptoms are high, cortisone is fundamental. It's really something that saves you from hospitalization. And not only in my experience, but in the experience of all the doctors working in Hippocrates.org and all the doctors with whom we are in contact in the world, is that if you treat, if you start treating the patients early, hardly anyone goes to hospital. The big question is, why can't we use something that is used in hospital and that is easily used at home? Why can't we start earlier? When patients get to the hospital, the treatment, the official treatment, is antibiotic, cortisone, heparin. So why not start before? Why can't we start this in the first days? It's very important, because they are very easy medicines to use. And with the supervision of a doctor, every patient can take these medicines at home alone. I'm really very keen to leave this message. Don't wait. Try and find the right therapy. If tomorrow you are positive, try and find the right anti-inflammatory for you, for your family, and try and have really to find somebody who helps you at home, because it's good. Hospitals are very good. They do a very good treatment when you get there, they treat you. But you can do this at home. You can start the therapy at home, so that even if you get to hospital, everything is easier because you already started. So this is really, I'm really keen on this, and I hope that always more people stop waiting and start treating and asking help to doctors who treat in early stages COVID-19. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Zoratti. Let's continue forward. Our next doctor is Dr. Vladimir Bodner from Poland. He's a successful pulmonologist and a pioneer for successfully treating over 7,000 COVID-19 patients in Poland using amantadine. Dr. Bodnar, the floor is yours.
Hello.
We can hear you.
Włodzimierz Bodnar, jestem lekarzem pediatrą, specjalistą chorób płuc. Prowadzę swoją przychodnię lekarską Optimę od 20 lat w Przemyślu w Polsce.
Hello, my name is Włodzimierz Bodnar and I'm a pediatrician and a pulmonary specialist And for the last 20 years, I've been running my own outpatient clinic in Przemyśl, Poland.
Moja przychodnia jest otwarta bez przeszkód przez ostatnie 2 lata. Nic się nie zmieniło w okresie pandemii, pracuję tak samo, jak pracowałam.
And my outpatient clinic has been open with no breaks for the last 2 years, and we have not stopped working during the pandemic. Nothing has changed since then.
Pacjent, który przychodzi do przychodni, nie ma warunkowego testu, jest przyjmowany niezależnie od stanu choroby czy stanu zdrowia.
So when the patient arrives to our clinic, we see the patients, we do not start with a test regardless of the patient's conditions, we start treating immediately.
Dzięki temu pracowaliśmy taką metodę, że pacjenci mają do nas pełne zaufanie i zrozumienie i sposób, dlatego dbamy o ich zdrowie jak najlepiej.
And because of that, we have managed to gain trust and confidence of our patients who are happy to receive treatment and they see us taking good care of them.
Traktujemy chorobę COVID-19 jak każdą inną chorobę, którą można i trzeba leczyć.
So basically, in our view, COVID-19 is just yet another disease that can and should be treated.
Nie ma strachu ani lęku wśród personelu przed wirusem SARS-CoV-2.
My personnel, my staff is not afraid or scared from virus of SARS-CoV-2.
Do naszej przychodni codziennie przychodzi 400 do 500 osób.
And every day in our clinic we see some 400 up to 500 patients.
Prawie wszyscy z personelu przechorowali chorobę COVID-19 bez wielkich następstw. Wszyscy są zdrowi.
Now, almost all of my staff have been infected with COVID-19 with no serious consequence and now they all healthy.
Wszechobecnie praktykowana jest najgorsza rzecz, że nie leczy się choroby COVID-19.
But what I see all around is the worst possible scenario whereby COVID-19 is not treated.
To jest niestety jedyna narracja we wszystkich mediach, która jest bardzo szkodliwa i przyczyniła się bezpośrednio do wielomilionowych zgonów w całym świecie.
Sadly, this is the only narrative that is present all around the media. Not only is it very harmful, but it also directly contributed to many million deaths all around the world.
Już na początku pandemii w 2020 roku oznajmiłem, że są leki, które mogą skutecznie hamować replikację wirusa.
At the very outset of the pandemic back in 2020, I stated that indeed we do have drugs that are efficient in halting viral proliferation.
Uważałem, żeby odnieść sukces w leczeniu choroby COVID-19, musimy mieć skuteczny lek hamujący replikację wirusa na każdym etapie choroby.
And I've always said, and I sustain that in order to treat COVID-19, we have to have an efficient drug that would inhibit proliferation of the virus in each and every stage of the disease.
Do leczenia przyczynowego zaprojektowałem chloroquine amantydyny.
So for causative therapy, I started off with amantadine hydrochloride,
który doskonale się sprawdził na pierwszym etapie choroby, wystarczający do wyhamowania repliki wirusa.
This proved very successful at the very onset of the disease, and it was sufficient to halt and inhibit the infection.
W następnym etapie zaawansowanej choroby amantyna jest bardzo ważnym czynnikiem, ale w komponencie z lekami do leczenia wielokierunkowych powikłań, które często występują w tej chorobie.
At a more advanced stage of COVID, amantadine is still an important factor, but it should be combined with other drugs to treat various complications that are often visible there.
Doskonale widzimy, że w okresie leczenia szpitalnego w zaawansowanej chorobie, w ciężkich przypadkach, gdzie zapalenie płuc często się nie cofają.
We can see very clearly that in hospital-treated pneumonia, there are often serious cases which cannot be eliminated.
Zapalenie płuc leczone szpitalnie często się nie cofają, bo nie ma tam czynnika stabilizującego aktywność wirusa i jeśli odporność człowieka jest zbyt słaba, to finalnie pacjent umiera.
The reason behind the fact that the pneumonia treated in hospital is very hard to treat is the fact that there is no factor that would stabilize viral activity, and if the patient's immune system is too low, then such a patient unfortunately dies.
Niestety w Polsce i na świecie nie wprowadzono do tej pory choćby jednego taniego leku o udowodnionym działaniu przeciwwirusowym.
Sadly, neither in Poland nor across the world, we have not yet introduced one cheap drug that would have a proven track of antiviral action.
Opracowane w 2020 roku schematy leczenia w oparciu o chlorozawodek amantydyny widnieją na naszej stronie przychodni lekarskiej Optima Przemyśl.
That's why in 2020 I came up with the treatment regime based on amantadine hydrochloride, and it is actually available on our website, that is Optima Clinic.
Amantyna to tani lek poza ochroną patentową o udowodnionym działaniu przeciwwirusowym.
Amantadine is a cheap drug because it's no longer covered by patent protection, and it has a proven track and efficacy of antiviral action.
Od 50 lat na rynku stosowany w neurologii i zażywany przez wiele milionów ludzi w chorobie Parkinsona.
It has been well established in the market. It is used in neurology for the last 50 years, for instance, in treatment of patients with Parkinson's disease.
W ostatnie miesiące coraz więcej doniesień o bardzo dużym potencjale leczniczym amantyny w chorobie COVID-19. Spływają one z całego świata z badań in vitro i in vivo.
Over the last few months, we've seen more and more evidence coming from the world class research in vitro and in vivo that confirm the efficacy of amantadine in the treatment of COVID-19.
Amantyna zmienia pH komórki, blokuje replikę wirusa, równocześnie łączy się z białkiem wirusa. Publikacje pochodzą z Berlina, Instytutu Kocha, Kopenhagi, Aten, Pekinu i wiele innych.
The mechanism is that the amantadine modifies cell pH, it blocks the viral proliferation, but it binds to the viral protein. And we can see that in the studies coming from Koch Institute in Berlin, Copenhagen, Athens and Beijing.
Na podstawie moich doniesień z leczenia kilku tysięcy pacjentów oraz pracy naukowej na ten temat, presji społecznej i wyleczenia także przedstawicieli rządu doprowadziłem do tego, że w Polsce zlecono wykonanie 2 niezależnych badań klinicznych.
Now, my own experience, and I remind you that I've treated some couple of thousand patients. I also have my own scientific contribution, but there's also been social pressure, and the fact that I have treated and successfully cured a number of high Polish ranking officials, all that led to the fact that in Poland we have now commissioned 2 independent clinical trials,
które mają na celu udowodnić skuteczność działania amantydyny.
They are aimed to prove the efficacy of amantadine.
Podobne badania są także w toku w kilku krajach Europy pod kierownictwem Kopenhagi, także zlecone przez Unię Europejską.
Similar studies are now pending in the European Union and led by Copenhagen.
Niestety wiele ośrodków, które przystąpiły do badania klinicznego w Polsce, najprawdopodobniej celowo blokują badanie kliniczne, nie rekrutując przez kilka miesięcy ani jednego pacjenta, a badanie jest prowadzone, aby potwierdzić lub wykluczyć działanie amantydyny.
Unfortunately, there are a number of centers that are supposedly taking part in the clinical trial in Poland, but on purpose they've been blocking the progress of these studies, for instance, not recruiting the patients.
Już raz w 2009 roku były sfałszowane dane, że amantyna nie jest skuteczna w leczeniu grypy.
And we know that, for instance, in 2009, falsified data appeared, allegedly proving that amantadine is not a drug that would be efficient in treating influenza.
To jest powielane do dnia dzisiejszego, że grypa uodporniła się na amantynę, to jest rzeczywiście nieprawdą.
It has been repeated all over that influenza is not a disease that can be treated with amantadine because influenza strain have already been resistant. This is obviously not true.
Nie było na ten temat badań, a odsunięto ją tylko na podstawie jednego sponsorowanego artykułu, że są inne leki bardziej skuteczne.
There hasn't been a trial on that, and amantadine is no longer used for treatment of influenza based on a single sponsored article proving that there's been drugs that can be more efficient.
W tej sprawie jest prowadzone postępowanie przeciwko jednej z firm farmaceutycznych i toczy się proces o odszkodowanie w wysokości 3,5 miliarda euro dla ludzkości.
I know that this case has been taken into court, and actually a damages case is pending worth some $3.5 billion.
Sam osobiście przebadałem około 8 tysięcy pacjentów.
But back to my experience, personally, I've seen some 8,000 patients.
Gdzie prawie 2,5 tysiąca z nich miało czynne zapalenie płuc w chorobie COVID-19, często o zaawansowanym ciężkim przebiegu.
Almost 2,500 of them did have active pneumonia with COVID-19, quite often very advanced and very severe.
Ze statystyk wynika, że osiągnęliśmy znaczną poprawę zmniejszenia ryzyka zgonu o 90%, a wystąpienie zespołu long COVID o prawie 95% w stosunku do danych z Ministerstwa Zdrowia w Polsce.
Our success rate is as follows. We were able to bring down the risk of death by 90% and the risk of long COVID by 95%.
Zastanawialiśmy się nad tak dobrymi efektami leczenia zmian w płucach i dynamice cofania się tzw. lecznej szyby w ciągu kilku dni.
We also saw, quite surprisingly, that there's been good dynamics in patients' improvement and also in the elimination of the so-called groundless
Szukaliśmy
acid.
eliminacji białka wirusowego.
So we decided to look for the viral protein elimination
I okazało
pathway.
się, że wydala się z moczem w postaci katepsyn, gdzie
And it turned out that basically the viral protein elimination pathway is through urine in terms of CTS.
w leczeniu musi być zawsze dwa elementy. Skuteczny czynnik hamujący reprykę wirusa oraz właściwe leczenie powikłań wielonarządowych.
So in the treatment, we must account for two elements, that is the efficient mechanism to inhibit viral proliferation and then full symptomatic treatment for the patient to improve.
Lecząc przyczynowo amantyną poprzez hamowanie repryki wirusa oraz wszelkiego znanego leczenia hamującego powikłania mielibyśmy w Polsce 60, a nie 660 zł dziennie.
If we did that, had we combined the efficient treatment with amantadine for the inhibition of the proliferation of the virus, along with all the complications, we would have 60 deaths in Poland rather than 660 as we do have now.
Do tej pory w Polsce leczyło się z amantyną około 1 miliona pacjentów.
By now, we have treated some 1 million patients in Poland with amantadine.
Z czego w przeciągu kilkunastu miesięcy 2001 roku zaordynowano ponad 400 000 opakowań amantyny, nie licząc innych pochodnych oraz przywiezionych z zagranicy o prawie drugie tyle.
The official data about the number of packages of amantadine in the few months of 2021 are 400,000, and you should add some other drugs also smuggled or bought from abroad.
Sukces można osiągnąć tylko wyłącznie, jeżeli mamy odpowiednią izolację, nie zamykając pacjenta drogi do leczenia, skutecznym leczeniem, profilaktyką prozdrowotną oraz odpowiednimi szczepieniami.
So the success in treating COVID-19 can only be achieved if we provide proper isolation of the patient, but also offer relevant treatment, relevant therapy, and health-related prophylactics, including vaccination.
Wiele razy apelowałem, aby leczyć tę chorobę. Niestety nikt medialnie nie podjął szeroko tego tematu.
I was making my case very strongly on numerous occasions that COVID-19 must be treated, but unfortunately the media never picked it up.
Widzę, że nie o to chodzi ludziom, wielu interesują tylko tabele, liczby zgonów wynikające z tego lęk i posłuszeństwo społeczne.
I can see that this is not what it's all about. Well, politicians or people want to see tables with numbers of death, and they also make sure that social order is in place.
Jeśli ktoś walczy o swoje prawa, nazywany jest antyszczepionkowcem, foliarzem i płaskoziemcem.
What happens if you fight for your right? You are always labeled as anti-vaccination activist or tinfoil hat of Flat Earth Society.
Niestety skrócone środowisko to dobre środowisko w celu manipulacji i osiągnięcia kluczowego celu.
Unfortunately, when you have a society that divided, it is easy prey to various manipulation towards the key goal.
Tylko skutecznym leczeniem i osobistym badaniem pacjentów przez lekarzy możemy zakończyć tę pandemię z pomocą tanich i sprawdzonych leków.
This pandemic can be cured and it can be ended with the use of cheap and available drug, but it is only if we combine efficient treatment and personal care of the patients, including personal examination of our patients.
Szczegóły nasze znajdują się na przychodni lekarskiej Optymy. Schematy leczenia COVID-19 są na naszych stronach w języku angielskim, niemieckim, hiszpańskim, włoskim i rosyjskim.
If you want to find out more, visit our Optima clinic website, and you can also get the treatment regimes for COVID-19. This is available in Polish, English, German, Spanish, Italian, and Russian. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bodner, for your presentation.
Thank you.
I know you are experienced in censorship. Many of us are, but we will discuss that later. Let's go forward. Our next doctor is Dr. Rosanna Ifari from Italy. You are talking about highly revered neurologist who is a respected past consultant for the Health Commission of Senate in Italy. She is also a scientific director of GRASSROOTS and a consultant for Bioca, University of Milano. I hope I read that correctly.
Mikocca.
Okay.
Thank you, Ivan.
The floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you for invitation to Ivan Sinic. I thank you. It's an honor to be here, and thank you to you and people like you that stand for the truth. Let's go with the slide. The first rule to defeat the enemies is to know him. And by knowing him, we can have the best strategy therapy. Why virus kills? We should explain that to the parliament for two reasons. An excess of inflammation in response that lead cytokine cascades, and with as consequence a lack of function of the lungs. The other mechanism is thrombosis by abnormal activation of a coagulation system. And thrombosis was seen in 90% of patients. Also, microthrombosis start from very early. So, if we know, next diapo, please. This slide. Next. If we know the mechanism underlying COVID, of course, we have a therapeutic strategy. First of all, as here underlined, empowering immunity system, because if I have a strong immune system, it cannot face directly the virus without complication. But I have also to fight inflammation and thrombosis next, and we have tools to it. For fighting inflammation, we have aspirin, cortisone, corticosteroids, and antibiotics. And they are new, all of them, and cheap also drugs. Aspirin share also antiplatelet activity. And corticosteroid is a key tools, and there is a growing number of studies that's showing the deep efficacy that is now unquestionably. Steroid decrease the mortality also in hospitalized patients of 41% in patients with pneumonia. It decreases fever, and also increase the pulse ox, the saturation. We have a lot of scientific papers that's showing that. Next, please. Next slide, please. Coagulopathy, the platelet aggregation, is the most serious and insidious complication of COVID, but we can fight them using heparins. The thrombosis, a serious complication, was shown by very brave colleagues, anatomopathologists. Let me say brave because they in Italy the anatomopathology was forbidden, but they did. In any case, and what they discovered that lungs are laterally peppered full of thrombosis. And starting from this moment, we know that we have to give enoxaparin. If we give heparin, we have 8% of responder. And there is an interesting paper by Mattioli in Italy that showed that using also intermediate dose of heparin is safe and prevents thrombosis in COVID patients. Next, please. Again, heparin should be given early. We have not to wait a massive thrombosis because microthrombosis start after 3 days of 4 days. And heparin interfering with platelet aggregation, of course, prevent people to go to the hospital. Next, please. Let's talk about now ivermectin. It's a great mitigation to lung opposites. Ivermectin, let me introduce you, is gained the Nobel Prize by OMS and is on the list of essential drug. of the World Health Organization. It was given to a sample of billions of people, and we know for this that it's a safe drug. At the last but not least, is a low-cost drug. Next, please. In the on the top, on the left side, in the green, you can see the country around the world where ivermectin was successful given. And let me underline that a few months ago, the FDA published a shameful, let me see that, Twitter, to discourage the use of ivermectin. And this statement was based on zero scientific study. On the other hand, on the left side in green, we have not 63, but now there are 73 studies that prove that ivermectin works in COVID. Next, please. In a percentage ranging from 69 to 83 of successful. In the part in red that you can see, there are 3 or 4 papers that show that ivermectin doesn't work. But let me underline, I think, the sample of patients that they chose was based on patients that were in a late study and already hospitalized. Of course, if I give ivermectin very late when there is thrombosis and a compromission of lungs is maybe too late. We should do it early, as shown the next slide. A moment. Have you ever wondered why an ivermectin that was born like an antiparasite works in COVID? It works also in Zika, it works also for other viruses, but why? Because it's link the spike protein and preventing the entry in the cells of the virus. In this way, the virus stay outside the cell and can be attacked by our strong immunity system that was enhanced by vitamin C, D, as Ira told before to us. Another mechanism caused ivermectin is antiviral activity is that it interferes with virus replication. Next slide, please. So this is the result. Of course, if the ivermectin is given in the prophylaxis, the goal is 86% of success in early treatment, 72, and of course a decrease when given late to the 40%. Gone. But let's see what's happened in the country where ivermectin was officially approved. Where is officially approved, the curve of death go in just 1 month to 0. Next, and not only Europe, but let's see what happened in India. In India, when ivermectin was included in treatment protocol, also again the same results. The curve went to 0. Of the curve of the death went to 0. So what are we waiting for to adopt it? Other? So if we can ask, can ivermectin help the pandemic? Yes. Our 3 group, Hippocrates.org, where I belong, I am, as you know, a scientific director, then PLSCC, Frontline Critical Care for COVID, directed by Peter Corey, and Bird. We can say 3 times yes, of course, we can't. We have a large sample. I personally treated 750 people, all went well. And my group treated 70,000 of people, and all went well except 9. Early treatment is really the key. Next, please. Of course, waiting, early intervention is the key. Time is life, and waiting, as we call in Italy, vigile attesa, that is the official government proof that is always could be lethal. Gone. Again, as is already done, cure 1,000 patients earlier. Early treatment, we can't stop to say that it's really the key to out of this pandemic. Next, please. So, what I would like to underline is that we should stop and Parliament should stop the lie that there is no treatment or scientific evidence for to treat the COVID, because for each drugs that we use, we have 1,000, and for hydroxychloroquine, for instance, to aspirin, cortisone, colchicine, ivermectin, heparin, all of them, we have scientific published papers. You can find it in PubMed showing that it works. Next, let me see a word about convalescent plasma. Convalescent plasma, it was made by antibodies coming from healed people. In Italy, they don't know that, unfortunately, Passage was decided, invented these techniques, and after 3 days, all patients treated with convalescent plasma recovered, also in a late state. So why and we can we adopt it? And recently Russia officialized convalescent plasma. Next. I coming to the conclusion, and thank you all of you and my group. I would like to leave you with just with I think we gave you an insight, a spark, the spark of science. It's up to you to give an answer, a political answer, a response, and spread the fire to end this pandemic. And this pandemic now is also your call. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chifari, for your beautiful presentation. We will, of course, come back to cures such as ivermectin later on. Our next speaker is Dr. Paul Marik from the United States. He's a successful pulmonary and critical care specialist with certifications from United States, Canada, South Africa, and Britain. He's also the founder and chairman of the Frontline COVID-19 Critical Care Alliance, which has been successfully treating COVID patients since the onset of this pandemic. Dr. Marik, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Could you unmute my video, because I can't unmute it.
Okay, let's see if the mistake is on our side.
Okay, there we go.
Excellent.
Okay, so thank you for inviting me to speak today. My talk is a brief review of the treatment of the hospitalized patient, and basically it's going to build on what the previous speakers have said. I don't have any conflicts of interest. What's important in treating COVID is to understand that disease progresses through a number of stages, and each stage is the treatment is very phase specific. So we have the incubation period, the symptomatic period, the patients have fever, malaise, cough. Many will improve. About 20% then go on to develop the pulmonary phase. Now, we need to know that the pulmonary phase is not due to the cytopathic effect of the virus, but an immune dysregulation. The time course does change somewhat with the Delta and Omicron variants. In reviewing the pathophysiology, which is really important because one has to understand the disease to treat the disease. And as the previous speakers have said, we have really two main pathological processes. Severe inflammation, and this is due to pulmonary macrophage. We have pulmonary macrophage activation. Monocytes are attracted into the alveolus, mature into macrophages and become activated by spike protein and RNA. And then we have a microvascular endotheliitis and thrombosis. Now, it's important to stress this is an organizing pneumonia. This is what it looks like. We get infiltration of monocytes into the alveolus, activation of macrophages, M1 macrophage, produce all of these inflammatory mediators. In addition, we get a complement-mediated endotheliitis, release of serotonin, platelet-rich thrombi, and activation of clotting. It's really important to emphasize that this is not ARDS. There is this misconception that the pulmonary phase of COVID is ARDS. This is not ARDS, and treating these people as if they have ARDS is a fatal mistake. So in terms of the management, this is what the NIH has to say, and this is what is perpetuated across the world. Remdesivir and low-dose dexamethasone. As we'll see, this treatment is ineffective, if not harmful. So these are the 6 studies looking at remdesivir, grouped by those sponsored by the study makers, Gilead, and the independent studies. And as you see, those sponsored by Gilead show a slight mortality reduction, whereas paradoxically, the 4 independent studies show a 3% increase in mortality. So it's really important to recognize that remdesivir is a toxic drug, it's a nephrotoxic, and increases the risk of death. One has to believe these independent studies. So if we look at the pulmonary phase here, these are all the medications that have been tested in randomized controlled trials. Really, there are 4 groups of drugs which are of benefit. Anti-androgen therapy, ivermectin, as the previous speaker has just said, corticosteroids, and low molecular weight heparin. It's also important to emphasize that there's no single magic bullet. These drugs act synergistically to deal with the various pathophysiological problems. So we came up with the MAF Plus protocol for the hospital treatment, stands for methylprednisolone, ascorbic acid, thiamine, and heparin. And the major components are methylprednisolone and heparin. In addition, we have ivermectin, vitamin D, famotidine, and melatonin. So the MAF Plus protocol targets the main pathological processes leading to organ failure and death, namely hyperinflammation and hypercoagulability. One has to deal with the inflammation as well as the increased clotting. So this is the core components of the MAF Plus protocol. For those of you not familiar with this, you can download this from our website, flccc.net, flccc.net. So this is the core medications, again, methylprednisolone, ascorbic acid, thiamine, and heparin. We then have adjunctive therapy with ivermectin or nitazoxanide, dual anti-androgen therapy, vitamin D, and melatonin. We then have second-line adjunctive therapy for patients who have not responded satisfactorily to the first-line therapy. Really important to emphasize that this is a profound inflammatory disease. Corticosteroids are amongst the most potent anti-inflammatory drugs we have, targeting a number of different sites. It's also important to emphasize methylprednisolone is the drug of choice for the pulmonary phase of COVID-19. This is supported by many studies. Unfortunately, the recovery study used the wrong drug in the wrong dose for the wrong duration of therapy. And it's absolutely essential that the dose of corticosteroid must be titrated to the severity of the disease. To use fixed dose, low dose dexamethasone really is an absurdity. This is a table looking at the number needed to treat with methylprednisolone and dexamethasone, and you can see the overwhelming benefit of methylprednisolone as compared to dexamethasone. We heard about ivermectin, 71 trials. If we look at late treatment, a 34% improvement, 52% improvement in mortality, 57% improvement in randomized controlled trials. So there can be no question of doubt that ivermectin is highly effective for both the prophylaxis, early treatment, and late treatment of COVID-19. Now, many people, as we saw previously, think that ivermectin is a toxic horse deworming medication. Clearly, this is false information and misinformation. This is from the WHO's own website, which you access. You can see the number of deaths since 1992 with ivermectin 20, and these were probably due to the death of a parasite, 5,000 adverse events. However, if you compare this to the vaccines, 1 year experience, over 14,000 deaths and 2.8 million adverse events. So it's really hypocritical to say that ivermectin is a toxic horse deworming medicine, whereas vaccines are safe and effective. And if you compare this to Tylenol, you can see more people die from Tylenol than from ivermectin, which happens to be one of the safest medications on this planet. And just to finish off, this is a study looking at proxalutamide in hospitalized patients with COVID. So this is a proof of concept study demonstrating the efficacy of anti-androgen therapy in both men and in women for the treatment of SARS-CoV-2. You can see the improvement in the COVID symptomology scale, and you can see this dramatic reduction in mortality. So again, emphasizing that this is a disease with multiple drugs working via different pathways, working synergistically to treat the patient. And the idea of using remdesivir and low-dose dexamethasone basically is a profound disservice to the patients. And with that, I thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Let's go forward. Our next speaker is Dr. Roberta Lacerda from Brazil. A respected infectious disease specialist who has been successfully treating COVID patients in critical care since the beginning of this crisis. Dr. Lacerda, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ivan, for this opportunity to talk about. We are now talking about the Brazilian experience on early treatment and also in hospitalized patients. We have this huge group of incredible Brazilian doctors, researchers, and we are here only as a voice speaker for them. We are together here to talk about this experience. We will start with a presentation talking about a very serious condition that we fought in Manaus, also in Brazil, in Belém, in North Brazil. It's known by a very poor region. We have, can you see my presentation? 1 second. Can you see it?
Na cidade de Belém, 2020, na região Amazônia.
Yes, we can see it. We can see it.
I will start with Brazilian protocol in Belém do Pará, a collapse that we lived in March 2021. And these brave doctors in the leadership of immunologist and internal medicine specialist Roberto Zeballos, and also anesthesiologist Luciana Cruz, initiated a protocol using corticosteroids and anticoagulants in the face of a very serious condition where we have a lot of patients without any hospital beds left. We have 12 hours since the deaths of people are waiting for recover the bodies so they can go to the cemeteries. It was very, very difficult. And from 210 patients with difficult to breathe, they initiated this protocol with antibiotics, anticoagulants, and corticosteroids, and they had 99% survival rates. It was an outstanding study published in the Health Scientific Research Publishing, and the publishers, editors highlighted the importance of acting before the evidence is clear. The doctors must act with all the tools they have at his disposal in the best interest of the patients. That was about this protocol. And we have this extreme, very good survival rates. In the second surge of COVID in Manaus, also in North Brazil, in the Gamma variant, we have the proxalutamide study, anti-androgen theory by our very good researcher, scientist, Dr. Flávio Cardegiani, Dr. Ricardo Zimmermann, and all his team, reducing mortality by 77%, and also with 88% survival rates. And it was an outstanding work of all that we can do with a team together, using the best at our disposal. It was patients in ICUs, and they were free for charge in most of the case, with 28 days, 85% recover of symptoms. And this another study, we have a protocol that was made by Dr. Francisco Cardoso, Dr. Ruth Costa, and Dr. Ricardo Zimmermann, talking about all these patients that we could treat. And it was published in February 2021. And so on, we started to treat all of patients in Natal with an 84% survival rate. First surge, April 2020, and the second surge, February 2021. Here in Natal, my city town in Northeast Brazil, we had 362 patients treated in hospital, and we have 6 deaths with an 84% survival rate. Remember that these 6 deaths, all of them were above 60 years with more than 2 comorbidities, and also they started the treatment after 10th day of symptoms. And we also treat with the multi-drug sequence protocol, which use ivermectin, nitazoxanide, methylprednisolone, high doses, as Dr. Marik always says, quercetin, N-acetylcysteine, dutasteride, and bicalutamide, if in non-invasive oxygen therapy. And this is the most new article published, as far as we know, the largest observational study made by Flávio Cardegiani and also Dr. Lucy Kerr, our very first lady professor, visionary on the use of ivermectin here in Brazil, and started in July and follow up a whole city in Santa Catarina, south of Brazil, Itajaí, more than 220,000 patients, and follow up.
Estudo realmente muito importante que pouca gente no Brasil está divulgando sobre ele.
From all the population, they have 71% using ivermectin as a prophylaxis and 28% not using. And they divided in groups, placebo and the interventional group, and the risk reduction for infection
Profilaxia de
was
ivermectina reduz aí
44%.
os riscos, né, de infecção em 44%, 56% de hospitalização e 68% de letalidade.
Risk reduction was 68%. But not without a little detail. These patients didn't use all the follow-up of 15 days of use. They stopped for some reason by 1 month, 2 months. But when we consider all the patients that did the protocol very with strict adherence, which is 0.2 milligrams per kilo for 2 days, between every 15 days, the ivermectin prophylaxis lead to a risk reduction lethality of 98%, with also better outcomes in inflammatory markers as RCP, hepatic, and renal function, dismissing and demystification of all this narrative that ivermectin has some hepatotoxicity or nephrotoxicity. We didn't have in this huge populational study any of these adverse events. To the physicians, we have this take-home message. It's the virus, stupid. Hit hard, hit fast, as Paul Ehrlich principle once said. With any drug you can have at your disposal. Early diagnosis, better outcomes, lifespan from post-COVID, and the maximum of the 30-day symptoms. To politicians, we say, change versus more than the same. Don't forget healthcare, early diagnosis and early treatment on prime outcomes and prime sectors of the public health. Respect medical autonomy on choice of treatments. Leave doctors be doctors. Or as we say here in Brazil, deixem os médicos em paz. Provide public access to repurposed drugs. These are one of our heroes, the Professor Dr. Fernando Suassuna in Natal, Dr. Lucy Kerr in São Paulo, Dr. Anastácio Queiroz in Ceará, Dr. Flávio Cardegiano em Brasília, Dr. Roberto Zebales at São Paulo, and in memory, Dr. Anthony Wong, São Paulo, that show us that we can do better if we can really choose the best interest of the patients. We have this in mind, and if we could see further, it's because we stand at the shoulder of these giants. I really appreciate your time, and this is our organization in Brazil, Médicos pela Vida, Doctors for Life. This is our site, www.medicospelavida.covid19.com.br. There you can find our latest protocol in association of all these physicians and researchers. And do not let your conceptions about the manifestations of disease originate from words heard or read. Observe and then reason, compare, and judge. Let the word be your slave and not your master. Live in the words. These are the words of Sir William Osler that tell us the importance of the physicians, the men in the front line, on the lead of the bed, teaching all the academicists how to treat patients or how to treat lives. We must not only to survive to COVID-19, but embrace our lives and freedom aside from fear. Thank you so much. This is our site and our ways of communication.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lacerda.
Aí a participação da doutora Roberta Lacerda. Nós vamos voltar depois para comentar mais com vocês, porque é muito difícil nós traduzirmos aqui ao vivo, porque a gente perde o foco do que está falando. Eu não quero que aconteça de perder informações que sejam preciosas. Então, nós vamos voltar, vamos falar com a doutora Roberta, enfim, e nós vamos fazer um resumo depois do que foi esse encontro importantíssimo, do que está sendo esse encontro importantíssimo no Parlamento Europeu, um encontro histórico dos médicos. pela vida. Aí com vocês, o Dr. Garrett, direto dos Estados Unidos. George Farid, desculpa, Dr. George Farid.
This is work that I've carried out with my partner and colleague, Dr. Brian Tyson, and primarily at an urgent care center that became centers, different locations for that, throughout the last 2 years, but also at clinics that I'm involved in for outpatient care. And also, I also, throughout the pandemic, was a hospitalist. So I saw the whole spectrum of COVID-19 from the outpatient early period of time through the evolution of patients deteriorating sadly and becoming hospitalized. I'm going to try to share my screen, but I want to just emphasize that what I'm going to describe deals with our selection of hydroxychloroquine as the major antiviral for the treatment. And I hope you're able to see my screen, but it's a picture of the world map with areas of the world where hydroxychloroquine was employed during the pandemic compared to other sites that are in red or dark red that didn't roll out that agent. There was
Dr. Farid, sorry, we cannot see your slide.
Oh, you can't? Okay, I'm going to try to, I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can get that to work here. You can hear me okay, and you see me, of course. Let's see if I can get that to come up. I don't have that option anymore on my screen. Well, let me just continue on. I'm not going to take up too much of your time because the other speakers presented the facts and the approaches that are so effective for COVID-19. We followed the early work of Dr. Didier Raoult in France, in Marseille, and then Dr. Vladimir Zelenko in northern New York, upper state New York, with the use of hydroxychloroquine as the major backbone of the treatment for COVID-19, based upon studies earlier with SARS-CoV-1, where chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine were antiviral in action. And our approach has been to bring patients in early and to evaluate them thoroughly, to get chest x-rays, lab studies, and history information that would allow us to distinguish between high-risk patients and those that were healthy and likely to be able to respond very well on their own to the viral infection. We employed from the beginning and continued on through today with hydroxychloroquine as the main backbone of our treatment protocol. We've added in ivermectin, 15 milligrams daily for 3 to 5 days, but the major agent is hydroxychloroquine. And the sad thing is that we saw patients recover completely, and that led us to actually writing a book that you mentioned that deals with our experience and sojourn through the pandemic. And it shows, we present the story of how we fought against the agencies in our country and even around the world, in Western world, where early treatment with hydroxychloroquine was not supported. And there was actually criminal and fraudulent activity that undermined that agent at the beginning of the pandemic. Sadly, we have now many other early treatment options for COVID-19, and those have been very well presented by the other speakers. But the hydroxychloroquine was available and we used it, and everyone was getting better, such that we didn't have any reason not to continue with it, except that we were getting opposition from the agencies in our country and other doctors that had fallen in line with the agencies, that there was a risk to giving hydroxychloroquine and that it was not effective. There now are over 300 studies that show early use of hydroxychloroquine is an effective treatment and effective antiviral that's very safe. In our protocol, we use hydroxychloroquine along with, as I mentioned, ivermectin, zinc, vitamin D3, and one of the intracellular antibiotics that have weak antiviral action, doxycycline or azithromycin. And in these work in effectively together, they work synergistically, I should say, and patients recover within 2 to 3 days. And it deals with the patients being treated in that early phase when viral multiplication is maximal, occurring in the first 3 to 5 days of the infection. If they're treated at that time, they don't progress into the later phases of the illness that ultimately lead to microcoagulation and severe respiratory insufficiency and requirement of mechanical ventilation in the hospital. So Dr. Marik presented how that is attended to, and I fully support that protocol for ICU management. We are now finding that we still draw upon hydroxychloroquine as a major agent for Omicron treatment. And it's we can treat Omicron now with, of course, monoclonal antibodies and with the recently EUA approved agents from the FDA, the Paxlovid or molnupiravir. Those are not as readily available, and they aren't necessarily any better than hydroxychloroquine for COVID-19 treatment. What should have happened in the pandemic was the widespread use and availability of agents like hydroxychloroquine for individuals to have on hand in their homes, such that they could use it immediately on the when they were initially diagnosed or symptomatic with COVID-19. And countries which did this, made this available for their citizens, did much better than the United States and many countries in Western Europe. Dr. Tyson and I have treated now over 8,000 patients, and our results are being written up, reviewed by a statistician. In the first year before monoclonal antibodies were available, we have a part of our study of 4,376 patients. 99.6% of those patients recovered fully without hospitalization. A very small number were hospitalized, and only a few succumbed to COVID-19. And if we compare those results with the patients in our community that didn't receive early treatment, it's a far, far better result, where our community had about a 3 to 4% percentage of patients that were hospitalized and became fatally ill with the COVID-19. So that's still the message that we have, Dr. Tyson and myself. We applaud our other speakers today in this gathering. It's an honor to be part of it. The truth is COVID-19 is treatable. COVID-19 patients, infected patients, do not need to die from COVID-19. Early treatment is the solution to the pandemic. It was from the beginning. And I just have a personal note to make that I was scheduled to speak in Washington earlier this week at a Senate hearing on the second opinion on COVID. I contracted COVID myself, finally, the first time after the full pandemic period. And my protocol completely resolved my condition within 2 to 3 days. So I'm now COVID-19 free. And I know that from personal experience, as well as seeing all of our patients, that the hydroxychloroquine is probably the most effective of the antiviral agents, and readily available and very safe. I thank you very much for this opportunity to speak with you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Farid.
Thank you.
Dr. Maccullough will be with us, but he's not here yet. So let's just wait a second. not available yet, so let's continue to questions and answers part. If Mr. Maccullough comes here, we will give him the floor, and then. Okay, so I may say we have seen all these beautiful solutions, science work, research, but many people in politics don't know about such solutions, and therefore they cannot implement them. They cannot make new policies. I believe this webinar will be very helpful to changing that, but it is a process that we all have to work upon. Okay, we have a question from a member of the parliament, Mr. Jakelinas.
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you very much for this excellent webinar by professional people. And I'm not a medical person myself, so I cannot go into details on medical side, of course, but from the way I looked at this pandemic, COVID-19, right from the beginning, I had high suspicions that, you know, from the statistical point of view, from the information point of view, especially, I myself was born in the Soviet Union to political prisoners and lived there for half of my life. So I saw exactly the same thing, control of information, censorship, propaganda, that's what's happening. And your presentations proved just once again that we are dealing with something very big and very serious. So at least it's a scientific fraud. Maybe it's a business plan to sell us as many vaccine doses as possible. Maybe it's a crime, but it's for the other people to decide. I'm not a legal person myself. But what we're experiencing here, also at the European Parliament, is blockade of information, of the opinions. The latest example, at least for us, was the meeting rally at the Brussels on Sunday, where the disruption was organized by rioters, and the people couldn't speak at the meeting, including ourselves and other people from all around the world. So that was the way to organize blockade of information also. So my request to you is, if possible, address to the members of the parliament, but in a targeted way, not necessarily at the same day, but send your presentations on behalf of the organizations, especially on behalf of organizations, if you are part of the organization, and also send this information to the European Parliament Bureau. There are just 10 days or so, there was election of new parliament leadership, providing this information, providing a brief summary of what you want to say, and also adding, if you have an opinion, that there has to be a parliamentary inquiry into COVID-19 pandemic, its management, its origin, and you know, we need to deal with that in order to prevent it from happening again. So this is my plea to you. We're doing as much as we can, but we are very few of us here at the European Parliament. But the majority of people are either reluctant or uninterested. So we need to break this blockade. So this is my comment. But maybe I could ask doctors from United States, several of you here, is there any hope that your efforts and your colleagues' efforts would make any change in the US? Because there are some legal processes already in the United States. And is there any hope, as you can see, that this narrative and also these decisions could be changing in any time soon?
Does anyone from the United States could help us with an comment or an answer, if possible? Okay, So we don't have an answer at this moment, but we will find Mr. Iacovinas. We will contact the lawyers in the United States as well. They're very well connected. Groups of doctors providing early treatment. Okay, we have another question by Mr. Joachim. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Willibor. I am very happy that I participated on this Zoom meeting, and I am impressed with the broad people of the board manage to have now. It's so big. It's so from the whole world to have doctors in this meeting. That's so great. I'm really impressed. I am a member too of Parliament, and I from Germany. And I'm not a medicine, and I come from a juridical background. And I'm very happy that there are some changes now. Many people are waiting for all this information, which I heard this evening. And I'm for myself very happy that I got COVID and had an early treatment in a little bit about normal things. I had ivermectin at home, but it's forbidden in Germany to prescribe. Therefore, I could but I had only a very mild version of COVID. Therefore, it was not necessary to take it. But I'm very happy that the results are so good in all countries where it is used, and it's my duty as a member to bring this information to other people. And I think we too, Willibor and my colleague, say we will go together to make an impact here, and that the people must know this information. They must know that early treatment is so important and is a game changer. And therefore, I'm so happy to be here today. And thank you very much, Willibor, for organizing this meeting this evening. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cox, for your comments. I'm also very honored to be with you here debating early treatment. Our doctors from America left just as they finished their presentations. This is why we couldn't get an answer to Mr. Iacovinas' question on United States. But as I said, we will contact them when they find time. They are very busy with their patients. In the United States, it's like noon or so they're in their hospitals and clinics, etc. Mr. Maccullough is still unavailable, unfortunately. I suppose he's very busy with his patients. Let's, Mr. Bernstein wants the floor. Mr. Bernstein, please.
Yeah, I'm going to try to attempt to answer that question. I think that, as a Canadian physician and observing what has been happening here in the United States and around much of the Western world, there has been a very strong narrative against early treatment. This has been quite consistent, and it's been very powerful. We have our agencies, our health agencies. So in Canada, it's Health Canada. In the United States, you have the FDA, CDC, NIH, who have quite systematically been opposed to repurposed medications. We have a scientific community, the research community with journals not very difficult getting published trials that show support for repurposed medications. They're quick to publish data that show medications that may be neutral or negative, or to get fraudulent trials published in highly esteemed journals. This is very concerning. So it has been very difficult, to practice early treatment in such an environment where there is hostility towards treating early. In Canada specifically, physicians who have been treating have been targeted by their regulators, and in some cases either suspended from practice or have had their licenses restricted simply for prescribing medications such as ivermectin, despite the wealth of information. We have mainstream media who have been attacking physicians, such as myself as an early treater, just as recently as last week in Canada. A very hostile environment. So we really need to shift the culture, to evidence-based, and again, allow doctors to be doctors. I don't know what the solution is going to be. It does involve, physicians like myself and my international colleagues speaking out, talking to people, because if it's not us, then who? If we don't do what we are doing to help our patients, then who's going to do that?
Exactly.
The voice. So, we will, continue to do this job of actually following the science, because truth in the end wins. You can't, you can't hide the truth forever.
Of course. Thank you, Mr. Bernstein.
It comes out in the end, and I think there'll be consequences in the end when the truth is accepted, by all, hopefully by all. But it's taking a long time, and unfortunately, a lot of people are dying because of that. This pandemic should have been over a long time ago.
Yes, indeed. We have now, thank you, Mr. Bernstein. We have now Dr. Maccullough also here. So let me just say a few words about him. Dr. Peter Maccullough is a highly respected internist, cardiologist, and epidemiologist, and is the most cited doctor in the world on COVID-19 treatment, with 51 peer-reviewed publications. Dr. Maccullough, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks to each and every one of you for attending. I just have a few brief words. I had the honor of giving the opening speech at the Defeat the Mandates rally in Washington, D.C. on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, and then 5 hours of U.S. Senate testimony on Monday, January 24th. It's clear the science is settled. The vaccines are not working. They don't stop COVID-19. They don't reduce transmission. They don't reduce outcomes related to COVID-19. It's clear that the vaccine mandate should be dropped. The current vaccine should be pulled off the market for a thorough safety review. We need a full governmental support for all forms of early treatment for the remaining high-risk patients. And that includes all the new drugs that we have available. We need full governmental support from that. Under no circumstances can any physician receive any pressure, coercion, or threat of reprisal for treating a patient with COVID-19. That won't be tolerated. And we won't tolerate any more misinformation from our public health servants. They serve us. That is the heads of Health Canada, of the US FDA, CDC, NIH, the TGA in Australia, MHRA in England, and the EMA in Europe. Doctors in practice will not tolerate misinformation and misguidance from any more of our public health officials. At this point in time, we're calling an end to it. Any one of them who wants to talk to me, I want a personal conversation with them. That's my message right now to the world. At this point in time, the doctors are in charge of what's going on in the pandemic. The public health officials are not. And we will guide the world out of this pandemic. As Dr. Bernstein pointed out, it should have been over with right now. The vaccine program has just prolonged the pandemic. It's promoted these hyperdominant mutants. There are three analyses now, one by Subramanian, Camp, and Beatty, showing the mass vaccination program has clearly backfired. It's caused greater numbers of cases. It's resulted in greater mortality. All the vaccines should be dropped immediately. They should be pulled from the market. The reports from France early on in March, from a paper by Bruno and colleagues, of which I'm an author, and then the evidence-based consulting group in the UK in June. It was clear last year, we told world governments to shut down the program. Unfortunately, there's been needless deaths and hospitalizations, both from COVID-19 and respiratory illness, and now from the vaccines. Those are my words. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maccullough, for your strong words. Indeed, we were following, and the world was following what happened in Washington. Also, we followed what was happening in American Parliament, in Congress. And I think that you made history. Well, I believe we all are making history. I would just like to comment also on Dr. Bernstein's speech on censorship. Just today, YouTube deleted my video speaking about your work, and it never happened to me before. I simply used your work, your published papers, your experience, and they just deleted it. And amazing. I mean, who has a problem with successful stories and results? People don't have to die. People's rights don't have to be taken. But this will not stop us, of course. I know you all experienced that, and that doctors are losing licenses, but we are on the right side of history, and we will be persistent. I have no doubt. Let's continue with the questions and answers. All right, Dr. Maccullough also had to leave, all right. I know he's very busy with his patients as well. I'd like to ask Dr. Lacerda if she's still with us. Yes, she's here.
Yes, I am.
To present us a study on ivermectin. Please, the floor is yours.
Hi. I think the transmission stopped. I didn't understand the question, Mr. Ivan.
We can hear you and we can see you. I was informed that you would like to present a study of 200,000 people that used ivermectin.
I also showed at the presentation, but I can surely say that this is the largest observational study in our knowledge in the world, talking about the ivermectin prophylaxis. As people use it every 15 days for 2 days in a row, they stop the rate of infection and the hospitalization. But the outstanding number is the reduction in lethality. For those who have total adherence, they reduce the lethality risk for 98%.
Of course, we were following your presentation as well very carefully. Thank you. Member of the Parliament, Jakelinas, has another question, please.
Yes, thank you, Ivan. Let me use this opportunity to ask the similar question of Dr. Bodnar from Poland, if he is available. We're neighbors. I'm from Lithuania. Wasn't born in Lithuania, but I live in Lithuania and represent Lithuania. What is the situation, political situation, as far as the COVID-19 is concerned in Poland? Is there any hope? Because statistically, we don't see so many cases. You know, these PCR tests are highly questionable by themselves. So the more testing, the more COVID cases. Mm-hmm. But you mentioned during your presentation that you treated some politicians as well. Is the message that there is early treatment of COVID is available? Is it coming to a Polish political, settlement, or is it still difficult? What is your prognosis, how the political environment and establishment, is it changing? Is it trying to understand what's happening really with this COVID crisis? Or is it still going along the way of World Health Organization and others who are pushing this narrative that the vaccination is the only way out?
Ja włączę tylko i powiem, że będziemy tłumaczyć. Okay. Yes, just give us a moment to translate, okay?
Sure, okay.
Tutaj mam pytanie do pana doktora. Ja jestem z Litwy, ale dotyczy to pytanie Polski. Chciałbym się zapytać, czy jest jakakolwiek nadzieja, jeśli chodzi o leczenie COVID-19 i przebicie się do klasy politycznej? Ponieważ statystyki są tutaj niestety bezlitosne i pokazują nam dużą ilość testów PCR, które są zresztą, no, można powiedzieć, kwestionowalne, które można zakwestionować. Wiadomo, że im więcej testów, tym więcej przypadków. Więc czy pan doktor uważa, że w jakiś sposób ta metoda wczesnego leczenia COVID-u wreszcie trafi do klasy politycznej, że uda się to wprowadzić, że jest nadzieja, żeby się to przebiło? No bo niestety wydaje się, że jest ta scena dość mocno zabetonowana, a mamy do czynienia z poważnym kryzysem. Więc czy pan doktor uważa, że jest nadzieja, że będzie możliwe wprowadzenie leczenia, czy też po prostu tej nadziei nie ma i że jedyny przekaz, jedyna narracja, która się utrzymuje, jest taka, że jedyną metodą dostępną na COVID są szczepienia?
Tak, mogę być?
Tak.
Powiem tak, w Polsce jest sytuacja jasna i klarowna. Wiele tysięcy ludzi, a set tysięcy ludzi leczyło się amantadyną i wiedzą doskonale, że lek jest skuteczny i działa. I dlaczego jest w tej chwili w Polsce jest stabilizacja, nie ma zamykania kraju, nie ma przymusu szczepień, bo doskonale wiedzą wszyscy w Polsce, że jest lek, który potrafi być skuteczny w hamowaniu repliki wirusa.
Dobrze, przetłumaczę. Well, the situation in Poland is quite clear now. I mean, we have thousands of patients who have been efficiently treated with amantadine, and they've been treated and cured. That is why in Poland we have quite a stable situation. There is no lockdown. Vaccinations are not obligatory because people simply realize that there is an effective and efficient treatment available.
Oprócz tego u mnie osobiście leczyło się wiele tysięcy ludzi. Oprócz tego za pomocą rozmów telefonicznych leczyło się następnych kilkaset osób. Poza tym wielu lekarzy w Polsce stosuje moją metodę leczenia amantadyny. Leczyli się ludzie zwykli, leczyli się parlamentarzyści, posłowie, senatorowie, ministrowie, sędziowie Sądu Najwyższego, z wszystkich struktur politycznych w Polsce. Dlatego jest takie przebicie mamy i przełożenie w Polsce, dlatego u nas jest równowaga, nie ma przymusu do szczepień i prawdopodobnie nigdy nie będzie.
Indeed, I personally treated some thousands of patients with amantadine. I have also worked in telemedicines with another couple of hundred of dozens. On top of that, there are numerous doctors who simply follow my regime of treating with amantadine. I personally treated ordinary people, just men in the street, but also members of the Polish parliament, members of the upper house, Polish politicians, Polish ministers and judges. So this message is passing through that there is efficient and effective treatment available. That's why in Poland we do not have obligatory vaccination, and I don't think we will have ever that.
Dostajemy także informacje telefonów z różnej społeczności mieszkających w Polsce, z Anglii, z Irlandii, z Szwecji, z Kanady, ze Stanów Zjednoczonych, z Australii, z Niemiec, z Belgii, Hiszpanii, Holandii, z wielu krajów i z Włoch o leczenie z pytaniem o amantadynę.
We also get numerous inquiries about the possibility of getting treatment with amantadine from England, Ireland, Sweden, Australia, Germany, Spain, the Netherlands, Holland, rather, you name it.
I jeżeli były sfałszowane wyniki badań z amantadyną w Polsce, nikt w Polsce to nie uwierzy.
And you know that the clinical trials are pending in Poland. If they falsify results, nobody's going to believe that. So that's it.
I understand. Thank you for your clarification and answering the question. I would like to now ask Dr. Flavio Cadegiani from Brazil to address us. Doctor, you have the floor.
Yeah, hey, how are you? I am trying to get into, but it seems that I'm not being allowed to initiate my video for some reason. I'm trying, you cannot initiate your video, but because the hosts unactivated my video. Okay, good. Oh, thank you. Okay, I'll start it.
We can see him.
Can you see? Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, I am the author, the second author of the study that Dr. Roberta Lacerda presented regarding the ivermectin in Brazil that we have just published. That was that she did an amazing presentation. She presented beautifully, and I'm also the main PI of the study that Dr. Paul presented on proxalutamide. So I am here to any question, any doubt, any further detail, questions regarding methodology. I just want to tell that we are about to publish further data of this study on ivermectin, and we should be the first large study to publish the full raw data, the data set on a patient level, of course, unidentified. So, but anyone else will be publicly available for external analysis. So I'm here just, I mean, I could make a presentation, but I think I'm just here to any doubts. It will be my pleasure to answer all to any question.
Thank you very much for your comment. We are expecting your results, and we will be very happy to present it in future meetings like this, because I don't want this to be our last meeting, of course, because this is a campaign, this is a process, and we need to update the politicians and people and everybody about the latest progress. And the more and more studies and successfully treated patients we have, the better, of course. Okay, let's continue on. Do we have another question? Not for now, then I will insert. I would like to ask a question of my own. In the beginning and now, so we have doctors from 6 countries. Americans had to leave, but in the beginning and now, what was your national protocol on COVID? So a person is positive. What can the government medical system officially offer to that sick person? Could you please comment on that?
Is it on me or someone else?
Why not? You can,
okay,
for good. Brazil, of course.
Well, Roberta is our big star for Brazil. Well, in Brazil, there was not any official government treatment guideline. However, we did have the autonomy to prescribe what we considered as necessary for our patients according to each case. We need to remember that when the new variant comes, some of the medications may change their efficacy because of the type, because it changed pathophysiology, clinical features, severity, pathogenicity. So we need to always be careful. For example, for the new Omicron, to me, hydroxychloroquine comes back to scene. Nitazoxanide still works, and ivermectin works as well because they act on interferon. And we know that for the Omicron variant, interferon is highly toxic for the virus. We have it, so we've been treating very successfully here. But anyway, here we treat with could be ivermectin. Also, we could be nitazoxanide. We've been treating patients with nitazoxanide very carefully, and particularly because of our studies with anti-androgens, including dutasteride, spironolactone, could be finasteride or bicalutamide, flutamide. Brazil has been widely using anti-androgens, which was particularly effective against the P1 variants. The P1 variant, which is now called gamma, which was generated or originated in the Amazon, was the most lethal variants to date. It is at least 4 times more lethal than the Delta variant, which was amongst the most lethal variants in the world. So we had these huge challenges here. So from the P1 variant, we learned to use multi-drug, high-dose multi-drug, multi-regimen treatments here. So we don't have a specific guideline. We highly individualize treatments. So if you get treatment for different doctors and even from within the same doctor for different patients, you may find different treatments because it really depends on the risk of each patient, on the stage they are placing, on everything. Of course, we use anticoagulants here widely because we know of the increased risk of thrombosis on the long term, not only on the short term. We use high-dose glucocorticoids when in inflammatory stage. We avoid glucocorticoid at the first stage at any cost because we know it increases effectivity and pathogenicity for further stages. So basically, that's it. We repurpose other drugs as well. Sometimes we use colchicine, we use ciprofloxacin, we use budesonide, we use fluvoxamine, we use everything that we have in combination. The only thing that we try to avoid is to we just try to avoid the nihilism. It's not all the country, just like any other country. We have those who treat and those who do not treat. But to us, those who treat, among those who treat, any combination that may be effective, the more aggressive with the variant, the more aggressive is the treatment. Now we downgraded the level, the doses, the amount of medications, because we found Omicron to be way milder compared to the previous ones. But basically, that's it. We don't have a specific one. We have some circulating guidelines between us that varies a little bit, but in common allows freedom according to medical doctors' experience, familiarity, ability to cost effectiveness, which may vary according to region, according to the stage of the patient. So we leave it. Unlike those who claim there is not such one medication, we believe there's at least 20 to 30 medications out there that could be effective, especially when you combine them. Because the very last thing, at least in Brazil, we believe that because of its complex pathophysiology, just like HIV, it only works when we had a cocktail with the different drugs, and that drugs may act synergistically between them. We believe that combining drugs could be more effective than using one single drug. That's it, basically. Roberta, please let me know if there's something I missed. I don't know.
Not at all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cadigiani. How about Mr. Bernstein? Are you still with us? Could you tell us about Canada? So you have a sick person, and what the government can officially offer to that person.
So in Canada, the official response is very little. There are a few. It also depends on which province. So different provinces have different recommendations. I'm in Ontario, and the Ontario Science Table is the so-called approved, governmental source. So right now on approved medications, they've recently added fluvoxamine as pretty much the only repurposed medication, as well as inhaled budesonide that may be used. But they don't recommend any other treatments for someone with minor, early COVID minor symptoms. They did just last week update the criteria, for the other treatments. So they've now added a criteria for Pfizer's new Paxlovid, based on risk status. I'm not sure exactly where you get it, but it's actually, what's interesting is they've indicated the highest priority for that product is higher risk unvaccinated individuals. The other thing that they've surprisingly done is they've added broader use of remdesivir as an outpatient treatment. I think giving a single dose infusion for higher risk of the mild category, so the not hospitalized patients. But otherwise, the guidance from all of the official organizations is really the same. Go home, isolate, drink fluids, take some Tylenol. It's basically just, symptomatic treatment. And, if your disease, progresses, then either proceed to the hospital. There are some new criteria for those who may qualify for, for the monoclonal antibodies, specifically sotrovimab. Again, it's quite restricted to persons of increased age and other risk factors. But if you're younger with higher risk factors, you wouldn't be eligible for the monoclonal antibodies. So most of these other treatments are not readily available. And of course, with the other repurposed medications, they say specifically ivermectin should not be used outside of a randomized, clinical trial. Hydroxychloroquine should not be used. All of these other, even vitamin D, they say the agencies, state there's no evidence. So it's quite concerning. This is what most of the hospitals are following. They have the guidance from the particular provincial science tables, and that's what they follow. So using other protocols, hospital protocols like the the Math Plus, from FLCCC, they're just not being used. There's massive amounts of resistance, and patients are not going to get that kind of care. They will receive remdesivir and low dose dexamethasone, and you have to hope for the best. So it's very challenging here in Canada for early treatment. There are physicians and nurse practitioners like myself who are doing our best to counter that prevailing narrative, to provide that early outpatient COVID care, and our results are good. I mean, it's if you can reduce hospitalization and death, why is that a bad thing?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your comment. Mr. Chetty, are you still with us? Could you comment on South Africa, please?
Yes, in South Africa, we haven't had the censorship like the rest of the world. Doctors were allowed to treat patients. However, the fear-mongering in the first and second wave of the pandemic kept a lot of doctors away from actually treating patients early. So patients, like the rhetoric around the rest of the world, were encouraged to isolate and only present to hospital if their symptoms worsened. However, in the third wave, the results of early treatment became apparent to a lot of doctors around the country. And so we have now doctors actually engaging in early treatment of patients. However, the first and second wave and the suppression of early treatment in the country, punting solely the vaccines as the means to curb the pandemic, has seen a lot of doctors punt that as the only way of actually solving this pandemic. What has thus transpired is that this has become a very divisive topic, and the doctors that are engaged in early treatment and understand the effects of the vaccine and the side effects that are being seen are being ostracized by the mainstream. And of course, government has only recently given us a platform to discuss early treatment. We had a presentation to our local provincial MEC just yesterday, and hopefully that stimulates some debate around the policies around COVID treatment itself. It has, unfortunately, from the perspective of a majority of practitioners, accepting mass vaccination as the only means has actually pushed government towards the propensity to mandate the vaccine for population. However, we've already seen the side effects amongst the population itself, and there has been some pushback against the mandating of vaccines. So I think we need to follow the science, and we need to be a little pragmatic and have some open debate about all the different avenues that are possible. And we need to find the safest, most effective way of preventing mortality and mobility for our patients itself.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your comment on South Africa. I'm very happy to hear that the government allowed doctors to do their job. Very happy to hear that. I would like to ask Dr. Bodnar if he's still here, if he would like to, even though he did mention it in his speech, if he would like to add about the Polish case. So you are sick in Poland, what can the government offer you?
W Polsce do 2021 roku właściwie nie było schematów leczenia. Mówiło się tylko o budosonidzie i leczeniu objawowym.
So by 2021, there was basically no treatment regime in Poland. Budosonide was the only one and only symptomatic care was taken into account.
W 2022 roku ministerstwo zamówiło chyba 50 000 opakowań molnupireviru i o skuteczności około 30% podawane przynajmniej międzynarodowo.
And in 2022, the Polish Ministry of Health made an official order of some 50,000 packages of molnupiravir with the efficacy of some 30%, proven efficacy for COVID treatment.
No i oprócz tego, według mnie, ja opracowałem schematy leczenia amantedyną, które są od 1,5 roku dostępne na moich stronach internetowych i wiele set tysięcy ludzi się leczy według mego schematu na pierwszym i na następnych etapach leczenia COVID-19.
Having said that, I have a proven success rate of treating thousands of patients with amantadine for the last 18 months, and my treatment regime is available on our website, and this is what I've been doing successfully for the last year and a half.
Nikt tego nie chce dowiedzieć. Nikt tego nie zakwestionował.
And nobody has challenged that. Nobody was able to prove me wrong on that.
Of course, this is why, since they cannot challenge it, they simply ignore it. This is the next best policy, then you don't want to do anything. Can I ask somebody from Italy who is still with us to comment on the Italian case? Dr. Chifari, are you still with us? I think she is not. Okay.
I am here. I am here.
Yes, excellent. Okay, so let me just repeat the question. You have COVID in Italy. What can the government officially offer you, the official government protocol?
The official government protocol is ridiculous. It's not a protocol. It's just waiting and tachypnea. It's not out the COVID. And the country, on the other hand, it take the glutathione that is useful for COVID. So if we give paracetamol, we help the virus, is no sense. And the other thing is to wait. To wait for what? It doesn't exist illness where you can make intervention late or waiting that it become worse. We, in every illness, I become a doctor thinking that I have to cure immediately, and early treatment, it's for whole illness, is the best option always. And with early treatment that we do with Hippocrates.org, that become the largest movement in Europe, we practically cure over 7,000 patients just in Italy, and more if you consider Europe and the world. We have Robert Malone that represent us in the USA, that you know perfectly, invented the technique of MRI virus. We strongly support the early treatment, because we saw that with early treatment, nobody go to the hospitals. Nobody, really nobody. It's incredible results. And and we still wonder why, but I think that you have the answer without saying it. It's a political choice, not a sanitary choice.
Of course. Thank you very much for your comment. Your colleague, Ms. Zoratti, would you like to add something, or everything has been said already?
Well, yes, I think everything has been said. And the thing I can add is that what I've been living together with my colleagues is the fear of giving medicines off label. So we know we can give them, but we also know that the guidelines from the government are different. And if something happens, we are always afraid. This is something really I would like, I would really like this thing to change, because we are doing our best. We are all trying to help patients, and it's really sad to work with fear. I've never had fear treating patients, and knowing that who waits and gives paracetamol is on the right side, and who gives something off label is under not under attack, but under observation. This is really the hard bit of it, and it's really stressful. I can say that at the moment I'm very stressed, and I think a lot of my colleagues too, because if everything goes right, it was just chance, and you just treated 800 or people just because they weren't very badly sick, and if only some small thing goes wrong, then you can be accused. So this is it.
I understand your position. I hear cases like this from all over Europe and all around the world, basically. I was in Rome at the International COVID Summit last September, and it was amazing how many people, scientists, doctors, were there testifying about their research results, findings. And I'm very happy that we were in Rome, because this also gives a certain message. We will also have, as far as I'm informed, another International COVID Summit end of February, start of March. So I believe the world will be following that as well. No, I'm wrong. It will be end of March, 30th March to 2nd April. Yeah, end of March, start of April. So I suggest we all follow that as well. Since we have no more questions, let's close this webinar. Thank you very much for participating. Let me just mention that one of the websites where people can get information on treatment is icsreport.org, icsreport.org. Of course, there are also some others, and we will keep tracking them as well. Thank you very much, and see you next time.
Thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you again. Thank you again.
Thank you. It was an honor. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, colleagues. You stand for the truth. Never be the back. Bye.